Hello everyone, Alan here. Boy, my throat. I can't sleep tonight, so I'm gonna do something that I've been threatening to do for a few years, and that is I am going to give you a little tour of this Gabler edition of my Ulysses, my personally annotated Ulysses. Now I'm not going to go through page by page, of course, like Frank Delaney did. We got through the first 10 episodes, halfway through, and then Mr. Delaney, great Joycean, great Irishman, he was doing these weekly podcasts from New York City, and he died. That was on 18 March 2017, and I went through every line of this book, at least this far with him. I was lucky enough to do it. Now, I've annotated up the rest of the book as well, but not as close as these first few pages. But we'll get to that later. And my history of Ulysses, this isn't the first edition of Ulysses I ever read. The first one I ever read, my paternal grandmother in 1984 bought me a copy of the Random House edition. And I'll put a picture up of what that looks like. That has the court proceedings in the beginning of it. And that's totally annotated. It's in a box in Phoenix. But this book, my Finnegan's Wake, which I'm going to do in another video, and my Dante, the Divine Comedy, these books go with me wherever I go or travel. If I'm moving, they'll go with me on the plane and carry-on, etc. And I just read this book and reviewed it a few days ago. Nora, a love story of Nora and James Joyce, and it's a really good book. And it's a biographical fiction, but it remains true to his life story. And I was really intrigued with the Paris years when he was writing Ulysses. I wish she would have spent more time on that. In fact, that was my only criticism of the book. But lately I've been Zooming for the past 2 weeks. It's every Thursday. A group of people over in Dublin it's called Ulysses 80. They're reading Ulysses in 80 days. They just got done with Circe. And the woman today was in Paris. Her name is Kathleen Flynn. And she's come out with a new Cambridge, it's called the Cambridge edition of Ulysses. And it has the original 1922 with a lot of notes, a lot of maps. It looks like they have the maps from Gifford's annotations in Ulysses, Don Gifford's. But like that, I haven't seen a copy of the book. It's on Amazon. It's too rich for my blood. Currently, I'll wait for it. It just came out this year. She's also the author of James Joyce and the Matter of Paris. And I'll put up some screenshots I took this morning. I have to get up at 5 a.m. Portland time to match with Dublin time at 1 p.m. in the afternoon when they're having their get-together. But Kathleen Flynn was the speaker today, the guest, and she was talking about the book, and she was Zooming from Paris. She's in Berkeley, California, professor, and she does a podcast I'm going to start listening to, and I haven't even searched her on YouTube yet or anything. Let's see, I've been thinking about Ulysses for a while. I do follow a podcast that was out of Portland called Blooms and Barnacles, and it's on Facebook too. But the couple who started it got married and moved to Dublin. He's an illustrator and a Dubliner, and she's an American, and now they live in Dublin. So I still listen to the podcast, but they're the ones who introduced me to this Ulysses 80, and then I had to get permission to go, and I haven't really talked yet on the Zoom too much, but I plan to. So, without further ado, we'll go over here and I'll set up and we'll page through my Ulysses and talk about it a bit. Okay, this is really impromptu. It's not scripted at all. But I'm going to be talking about the Gabler edition of this, Hans Gabler. It came out in 1986. And this isn't the first Gabler edition I owned. I was in Dublin on scholarship at UCD, University College, Dublin. And I had a copy of this. And we had a party, and a friend of mine, Angus, it was closing down, the party at the bar, or the bar was closing at the club. So he told me to, here, take these bottles of wine and put them in your book bag. So I thought they were corked, and I put them in my book bag, and the wine seeped all over my copy of Ulysses, and I was really upset until I dried it out, and it was like a tie-dyed version. I had like grape stain all over the borders of it. Unfortunately, I lost that edition. But I have read this edition I got it in 2015, 24th of May. And then I read it in Georgia. Let's see. I read it again in Toledo, Ohio, October 2015, November 2015, December. I read it in July 2016 with a Facebook group. We read it, most of it, or not most of it. I even forget where we left off on BookTube, but we tried to read it. Maybe we can try again. And then I read it in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, November 2016. Let's see. I read it with The Great Courses one time, Audible, in 2015. And let's see, what else? I think that's about it for how many times I've read this edition. There's, I think, 18 editions of Ulysses out. Now, I mentioned the Cambridge edition. That is going to have a copy of the 1922 Shakespeare and Company, the first edition of that, with notes and commentary on every episode by Joyceans. And then I read it with Frank Delaney, as I mentioned. That was in 2016. And we made it up to, picture my grandma. We made it up to, I think this is, what is it? Wandering Rocks, episode 10. So about halfway through, line by line analysis. Every page, line by line. Sometimes Frank wouldn't even get through a whole page. So every page, line by line, different colored pens. You see that? This is a Hades episode. The cemetery, where Bloom meets Simon Dedalus, Stephen Dedalus' father. Some Golden Dawn references here. George Russell. He was very much into the occult. Note on Frank Delaney again. Yeah, there was 2 million downloads. I have a note here, 30th March 16, Delphi Newgrange. I was lucky enough to see New Grange. The light hits just right on the summer solstice every year to illuminate I believe it was a crematoria, Lestrygonians, Homer's cannibalism chapter. It's where Bloom is a foodie and he goes to Davy Burns' Moral Pub, a pub I've been to. Now, Ulysses takes place in 3 parts. We have part 1, the Telemachus, after Telemachus, part 2, the wanderings of Ulysses, and part 3, the homecoming. That's after Homer's Odyssey, which it is the schemata is based on Homer's Odyssey. There's 18 episodes, and I'd like to say that the novel does not take place in 24 hours. You can immediately tell that someone hasn't read the book if they say that, because it takes place in about 18 hours. Joyce had intended to end it with Ithaca, the 17th episode. And in the Random House edition and all the other editions almost, I think the Brody edition has a square, but there should be a big dot and Plunkett, full stop, after the last question, where? And he had intended to end it there. And that's at like 1, 2 in the morning. When they're in Circe, the night town, it's midnight. So Ithaca is between 1 and 2, and then Penelope, that's Molly's soliloquy, is the schemata is a infinity sign. And you can always remember that it takes place in 18 hours because there's 18 episodes. So I think I'm going to dive back into this. Here's a picture of my apartment when I was an undergrad. I still had a tree of life I drew by myself, but a map of Dublin, a little collage I made, Guinness, postcards from my friends in Dublin. Love that dirty water. Here's a note from my late aunt with all my pedigree and my relatives, my grandfather. But that's my copy of Ulysses. I wish I had my Random House one, or I would show you that too. So next, I'll be going through my annotated Finnegan's Wake. I've had this edition. It's a John Bishop edition. I like it because it has bigger. The lines are spaced out more. There's more margins, so you can write along. But I'll be going over this later on today. I have a bunch of postcards and markings in it, of course, and you can imagine. And I'll put up, let's see, there's a lot of famous people who have annotated their own Ulysses, and Susan Sontag, who else? Marshall McLuhan, a lot of Joyceans, of course, Fritz Sen over at Zurich. And I'll put up a screenshot up here of their annotations. It's not the first. I had at least 2 other Finnegan's Wake, the ones you usually see, all annotated up. I started reading Finnegan's Wake in Tempe, Arizona in a group I'm still friends with Eric Wagner on Facebook. Hey, Eric, if you ever see this. But they turned me on to it, and from then on, I was just off to the races. But I don't want to make this too long, so thanks for your indulgence, and I think I'm going to be getting back into Ulysses again.